Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and in this video we're continuing the Army Painting Orks Clans series, and this time up it's the flashiest gits of the lot, the bad moons. Now these are the yellow guys, the ones where you walk past a table and there's an army of them and it stops you in your tracks because, well, they just look awesome. Yellow's fantastic, it really pops out at you, and then the amount of fun you can have with all the decals, all the freehand, all the extra bling and stuff you can add to these guys to make them stand out is just a ton of fun. So even though we're going to be painting up a basic boy for this video, we should still be able to show off where he's been spending all those teeth he's got. So let's paint. So first up is the skin, and probably, I know, as important as I think the yellow on these guys. I think the skin and the main armour colour's the thing, right, with the Orks. Or certainly that's, if I was painting an army of them, and that's the purpose of this video, that's sort of how I would go about it, those are the things I'd be focusing on. And I've decided to use a different recipe for this one than the recent Ork videos I've been doing. And actually on that note, I would highly recommend, if you're coming to this video without having seen the previous Ork videos, so the collecting and painting Orks and the Death Skulls video, it's very much a companion video to those. There are elements in this that I will go into in more detail in those videos, and there's other things in there that I think really enhance the stuff I'm covering this. Also, some of the stuff is in better focus in those videos. I'm really sorry, I'm still getting to grips with this camera. This one was filmed alongside the Death Skulls, so there's a few blurry moments in this. I promise you I'm getting better with it, and it will be wonderful very, very soon. But for this, I've done exactly the same idea as with the Death Skull. I've just picked 3 greens with fairly big steps between them, and I've chosen to make the shadow green much more blue. So this is the Stegadon scale green. And then I've chosen a more yellowy green for the highlight, just to add a bit of variety into there. So I've done the base coat of the Waagh Flesh, the mid-tone green that we got at the bottom there. Must admit the coverage really wasn't fantastic on this, but a few layers, it was good enough. And then we want to make a wash out of the darker green colour. So I've added in water, but I've also added in a little bit of medium, Lahmian medium in this case. Doesn't overly matter, could be contrast medium if you wanted, or just go out and grab any sort of acrylic medium from an art shop. The purpose of it here is just to help the pigments that are in the paint not split out too much, so they can sort of settle more evenly, and we don't get sort of weird pooling effects and that stuff. So I'm washing this all over the model. You can see, or you will see throughout this video, I'm painting with very dilute layers of paint. This is just the way of painting I'm enjoying at the moment. It allows us to build up lots of little marks on the model and make it look, I think, quite interesting. It is not necessarily as slow as you may think it is, because we're not going for that super solid coverage result that we perhaps will go for with your classic sort of triad system, base layer highlight type thing. We're wanting there to be sort of variety across the surfaces. And you'll see I went back in for a second application of it just to make sure I was getting it in all the nooks and crannies. So now it was on to painting the main colour of the flesh. I'm slowly going to mix in the Orruk skin, and I completely chose Waagh Flesh and Orruk skin because of the names of them. I have no idea if they'll look good. I think they do look pretty good at the end of the video, but you know, I like using paints with the names on them. I think it's fun. So here I am. If you can squint a little bit and sort of imagine this is in sharp focus, I'm very similar dilution of paint to the wash. I've just got a lot less on my brush so that it's not flooding off my brush. And I'm still using a large brush. This is a size 3 Artis Opus Series S. And the reason for that is that I can get loads and loads of paint on the brush, so I'm not having to constantly go back to the palette. Particularly useful in this hot weather that we're having at the moment, but also just for efficiency, perhaps isn't quite the right word, but it's relaxing. I can work all the way around the flesh on this Ork in one go, and then I can load up the brush again and do all the way around on another go. And it's just, it doesn't sort of break up that flow as you're doing it. And you can see here I'm not trying to focus on getting, as I say, perfectly smooth, even coverage. That's the word we're looking for. Not perfectly even coverage and all that. I want a little bit of variety on there. And I'm focusing not necessarily on the edges, as it were, because we already have edges, do we, when we're working with all the musculature, but thinking about, well, if a light's shining on him from above, where is the light going to hit down on him? And then we're building up those highlights. Generally, it's the raised part of the muscle belly, the way they're sculpted, particularly on his shoulders and the things there. But always just have a look. If you're unsure, tilt the miniature, look top down on him, and you can see where that light's going to hit. And the reason I think that's important is sometimes you'll have a recess on the model. Like for instance, his left arm where his sort of bicep and his tricep are joining there, you might think, oh, that should automatically be dark because it's a recess. But if it's facing directly up into the light, actually the light's going to go and hit that. So it's always worth sort of having a look. Now, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to those of you that support us over on Patreon. So if you'd like to get extra videos each month, often masterclass level ones from Andy, some of my hobby stuff, and some blogs by Ben and some upcoming PDF tutorials from Ben as well, then consider checking out our Patreon. If it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't be able to do anything that we do. You also jump into an exclusive members-only Discord where you can just chat loads of hobby and you can make suggestions and requests for tutorials as well. So thank you to those guys for all the support. If for any reason you can't support us on Patreon, then your likes and your subscribes, your comments, your shares here on YouTube, they make a massive difference to people like us who just do kind of boring painting videos. So we need you to spread the word, as it were, to help it get out there. So thanks for that as well. Now, once I've finished that and I just built all the way up to pure Orruk Flesh there, I'm going to go in and just add a little bit of interest into the shadows. Now, I'm going to use an airbrush for this. You don't have to. You could brush paint this, but I like doing this with the airbrush. We also have a signature series of airbrush with Harder and Steenbeck, so it seems a shame not to use them, and I think this is a perfect application for it. Now, recently, I've formed a real crutch with AK's Quickgen Reddish Flesh. So in an attempt to move slightly away from that, I'm using a colour that looks incredibly similar to it. It's called Shadow Grey or something, it says on the bottle. The reason I've chosen this one, not just to purposely not to choose Reddish Flesh, I think Reddish Flesh would look fantastic on this scheme, is because this has a bit of purple in it. And I thought, well, if we're going to do red and sort of yellows, more focusing on the other skin tone, let's focus a little bit more on the blues and the purples with this skin tone. So you can see I've gone for a much more bluey green in the shadows with that Stegadon one, and then spraying that purple up just from underneath just adds a nice sort of, I think, quite a soft level of contrast on the model, making those areas of shadow a little bit stronger, a little bit deeper, but without necessarily being too in your face. Also, it's super easy and any overspray really doesn't matter. Then I was going to black out the areas of the model that I was going to do metal, just to get an idea of what I want to be light and dark on the model. And then it was onto the armour. So Bad Moons, probably more than any of the other clans, the armour's going to be the absolute key point, right? So I left I picked this model in particular because you've got quite a few armour panels on him as well. I figured these were the ones that I wanted to do yellow. I think if there are a lot of panels, it would be nice to leave some black, which is why I left the panels on his pistol black. In the end, I think I ended up painting them yellow anyway. But yeah, if you look at sort of the artwork and stuff, they tend to alternate. They might have a yellow panel with black markings on. They might have a black panel with yellow markings on. And I certainly think if I was painting a larger miniature, say one of their Dreads, or the Killer Cans, or even someone like the new Nasdreg model, I would definitely use a bit of variety there. Personally, I'd also like to introduce more colour into those. I love the old artwork for the Bad Moons where they utilise, like, red is still an important colour to them, right? They're orcs, so there's still red on there. And I think you start sticking red on there and yellow on there, you these wonderful, you know, sort of primary colours, and it has that lovely nostalgic hit. But I think if you paint them in this style, you should still maintain a nice sort of gritty kind of, I think, kind of quite grimdark feel to them. So for the yellow, I've done this very similar to how I did the knob in the painting and collecting video. I am building up layers of browns through to yellow. So I've used a nice chocolatey brown, chocolate by Minicolour. I've then used a more reddish sort of orangey brown. In this case, I've used Russet by Minicolour, but you could use something like Mournfang brown. So you could use something like Rhinoxide and Mournfang brown. And then I've used Marigold, which is this beautiful, warm, sort of kind of egg yolky yellow colour, which I think is probably a bit richer than something like Yandon from Games Workshop. I can't think of the direct comparison for a GW paint, but there will absolutely be one. But the point is although they are yellow, we're actually using an awful lot of sort of browns and oranges to build it up. And I'm using tons and tons of little hatches, little scratch marks to build this colour up. I love how this looks, and I think particularly for orcs, it works really, really well. For me, it makes the surface look all lumpy and bumpy, but actually the finish is really nice and smooth because we're using diluted paint, so we're not getting a build-up of paint on the model. But all those different marks are just, in my opinion, adding tons of story to those armour panels. You glance at it and you're like, oh, this thing does not take care of its armour, which is exactly what we want, right? And it also means I don't have to go in and do loads of chipping and all the rest of it later, because it's done at this stage. Now, I've included me doing it on the knob model from a few videos back, just because it is better footage. And I was absolutely gutted when I filmed it on this boy. Most of it was out of focus. Not as gutted as something that happens later in the video, which is a first for me. But we'll get to that when we come to it. But you can see I'm on about just loads and loads of little marks. And I love this way of painting at the moment. You're going to hear me talking a lot about it, particularly because of the lack of stress involved in it, in the sense of, oh no, worry, or I don't want to accidentally make the wrong mark. I don't want to, get it wrong here. None of that matters, because every individual mark isn't making a huge amount of difference. So one or two stray ones here and there, if anything, it just adds to the character. You can see we're focusing on keeping the density of those marks with each colour more towards where the light would hit on the panels, and doing fewer of them as that moves away from the light. And we naturally get a nice sort of gradient there, very similar to if you were to use something like stippling as a method of transitioning and blending between colours. But I love it. It's really relaxing. People go on about yellow being difficult. This could not have been easier, and probably took a couple of minutes at most to do the model. So, you could comfortably do like 10 boys in a sitting here. You could do their yellow armour. And here I've just gone in and glossed that belly panel, because I'm going to stick a decal on it a bit. And while I was waiting for that gloss varnish to dry for a bit, cure, not fully cure, but it's certainly dry enough for what I need to do, I thought I would get on and see what else I could do on the model. So just doing a few sort of checks on this panel here. We'll focus more on checks when we get to the Goths, obviously. But again, I like the fact that all the Orks use that as a motif. Again, I think it really helps identify them, especially if you're going to do an army of mixed clans, which I would if I was doing one. Little elements like that running through it, even though they're not necessarily the same colours, I do think helps tie things together. Although personally, I'd also be definitely doing different greens for the skins across an army. I think it makes them far more interesting to look at. But you see here, because it's Orks, I'm not worrying about everything being too accurate. It needs to look all chipped and battered. It needs to look sort of painted on by Orks or Grots, more likely. Now I popped one of the new decals on his tummy there. Microsol, Microset. We've done a video all about decals. If you want to go and learn more about that in detail, I will link up to it. And then it was on to the cloth. So it seemed a shame with a bad moon not to do some stripy trousers. And I love striped trousers on my Warhammer miniatures, particularly in fantasy. But again, I keep saying one of the things I love about 40k is that it is space fantasy. So I knew stripy trousers were going to feature at least once in this series. I don't think there's any sort of trick to doing them. Just get comfortable. Try and not do it on a day where it's about 28, 29 degrees. I'm going to do white lines first, followed by the yellow over the top of it. And I'm not trying to do the line all in one go. I'm going to get to where it's comfortable, and then I'll move the mini and finish it. So in the end, I turned him upside down and drew the line up to meet them from where his knee bends. What else is there? Keep the paint nice and thin. Don't have too much on the brush so it floods off. Again, use a nice big brush so you've got plenty of paint in there so it's not drying before you get to the model. That helped. And I chose to do black trousers and then the white and the yellow over the top of it because it was a lot easier to correct the 104 mistakes I made whilst doing the stripes, because you could just paint the black in and blot them out. And I suppose without being flippant, the biggest tip I can give with this is to try and maintain an even pressure as you are drawing the line. There will be a temptation to push the brush more at certain points, which will splay those bristles out and thicken the line. If you can just try and pull the line with the same pressure, you'll get a nice even width line. So once that was done, it was on to his vest, and you can see the overspray we got from the shadow grey colour, and I think it looks really nice. And if I was going for a higher contrast look, I would definitely think about doing more pink, as it were, in the shadows of his vest. I don't want to leave it just as is because I think that's lazy. It doesn't look painted, it's just a mistake. But as I say, if I was going to go in and add more perhaps interest to the model, if I wanted to spend longer on it, I would probably look at doing this stage now and then giving it another little blast with the shadow grey colour from below with the airbrush, or just glazing a little bit in with my brush. I think could be interesting. I don't do an awful lot with coloured shadows and stuff. Perhaps that's something I'll do more of in the future, but I just thought it did look quite interesting and wouldn't have been something I would have considered as a shadow colour on there if I hadn't seen it via the mistake. Then he's got this little sort of furry hat or fur rim to his hat because he's a bad moon. He's a bit posh, a bit flash. So I'm and hard about this. I was like, oh, go on, let's do it red. Let's do it red. And I thought the red would look awesome and in context. However, I think it would pull focus too much from the model. And again, the point of this video was more to look at the green and the yellow on him. So I thought we'll keep it a little bit more simple. And I took a cue from the new Nazdrake model where the fur he's wearing is just this kind of sort of off-white fur. And I thought, you know what, it's interesting enough. It also looks quite natural, which I like. I like that the Orks still have those, I guess those fantasy elements, right? They still use hides. They still use a lot of leather and stuff. So that was the decision in the end to do it that colour. And you're just, again, looking for your sort of brown and beiges, deck tans, those sorts of colours. We've got tons of them. Then the leather. I decided to split the leather up into two different colours, a nice warm reddy brown here, and then black for the sort of braces that he's got on. This is the same reddy brown mix that I used on the death skull, so it is chocolate, it is mahogany, and it is russet, all by Minicolour. But again, you could use something like Rhinox hide. Russet we used earlier is very, Mournfang brown, some of there, and then you're just looking for that sort of mid sort of red brown to glaze in, keeping it again nice and simple, very, very thin paint. This is something I'm just loving painting with the really dilute paint, and there's times you'll have seen in the video where I've clearly used far too dilute of a paint for the application, but that's all just part of, I think, when we learn new things and we shift how we do stuff, it's sometimes hard to identify it the first time, but particularly useful, I guess, recording your work. I can look back and critique it myself and sort of make a note for what to work on next time. And even if I wasn't doing it for videos, that's something I will always try and do. I will finish a test piece or a couple of test pieces, and I keep a notebook. I will write some notes about what I thought about the process, not just all the recipes I used. And then ideally I'll talk to a couple of friends, whose opinions I respect, and ask them for some of the feedback on there. And that's how I've typically in the past tried to improve my enjoyment and the end result of the model. So you can see there, once the decal was on, I just want to sort of weather it into the surface a little bit. So just giving it a few little glazes of the brown and then a few little scratch marks just to make it not look too much like a sticker that we've just popped on there. Now here we go. You can barely see it, but there was tons of really good footage of me painting flames here, and my hair got in the way of nearly all of it. I've got the camera at a different angle to what I've used for the last 6 years or whatever it is. And I just leant in to look at it more, and in came the fringe. So sorry about that. I found these flames so difficult to do. I just practiced on a piece of paper beforehand and then went in. But you'll notice that I did a little layer of gloss varnish I sprayed over this panel before. So I sprayed the gloss varnish over the decal to seal it in, and at the same time I sprayed a little bit onto the panel here, just enough so that if I made a mistake, like I do on this flame that's coming up, I could wipe it off quickly and I'd be able to have another go. Again, we covered this on the Death Skulls video, sort of give yourself every chance to succeed. There's no cheating with any of it. We're simply using different products and their properties to give us the ability to try and get close to achieving what's in our head. But I didn't like those flames, and the reason is they just look like two sort of Zs or Ss, and it's not flames. I found that I draw the S. Should have filmed this, shouldn't I? Draw the S. Each time you change direction, that part gets a little bit longer and then fatter and fatter towards the bottom. Easy to say, wasn't that easy to execute. Although I imagine by the end of doing a Death Dread or something, you'd be fantastic at it. So there we go. Right, onto the focal points. So I was very happy with the skin on the rest of him. I really didn't think it needed any more. When it's just the skin on the model, it can look a little bit like, oh no, this doesn't look so good. But I think as soon as you get the other stuff in and around it and start framing it, I certainly found it much more pleasing to look at. And all I've done here is added white into the lightest green because I didn't want to push the yellow in it too much more. Again, because I was just looking for a different kind of hue to the model than we had on the other green one. So all I've done is added a little white in, and then I'm just doing a bit of extra highlighting on his knuckles and on his face. That's it. He's got a couple big bulgy veins and stuff I thought was nice to nice to pick out. And then a little bit of Magos Purple contrast paint just along his lip and his nose, because I do quite like that pinky look on the orc face. I think it's nice. I was tempted to do a blue lip on this guy, like I mentioned in the last video. I think I'm going to do that. I've got an idea for another quite different skin tone, and I think I might try and do the blue lip on that one. And then for his tusks, again, exactly the same as the death skull, which I believe is in focus in that video. So on that previous death skulls video, I had blacked out the weapon, and then I washed over a little bit of Minicolour Jasper, so something like Doomball Brown's not dissimilar, a very, very orangey brown, reddy orange brown. You can see I've watered it right down. And I sort of washed it all over the black and really liked how it looked. And I then put a load of silver over the top of it, and someone mentioned in the comments that they thought it looked nicer before the silver, and I had to agree with them. I thought that as I was doing it. I thought, okay, for this guy, let's have a go. I don't think I will move into doing NMM for all my stuff, and that is not what this is intended to look like, is NMM, but it's just the idea that maybe that, it's the metal has a much different finish to it, or it's powder coat or something. It's a different kind of look. And I love it, and that's all I've done for it, is wash that in and we're done. And then for his other metals on him, the silvers, I'm going to mix up Iron Warriors and a metal colour series metal here called Jet Exhaust, I think. No, Exhaust Manifold, maybe this one was. It's basically like 12 of them, exactly the same colour, kind of a dirty dark silver. And the reason I mix those together is because they're very similar colours, and I like the properties of both of them. Individually, they could be slightly improved, but you mix them together and I think they're lovely. They flow really nice off your brush. It's a great colour. It's a really, really sort of tight flake. I just think they look fantastic. And then keeping it super simple, because we've put the work in on the armour, we've put the work in on the skin. I don't want to spend loads of extra time on the metals. I'm giving it a 50-50 mix of Agrax and Nuln Oil. I used to use Rattling Grime for this, but I haven't had much success with the two new pots of Rattling Grime I bought, so I've gone back to doing it this way. Nice thick wash. And then once it was dry, just a little highlight with a brighter silver. This is an old pot of Ironbreaker. Any lighter silver will do. And I'm just focusing on a few of the edges, just so, again, it looks like we've given it a little bit of thought. But again, I don't want to spend loads of time. However, should you wish to elevate the models, or perhaps maybe for the knobs or the leaders or whatever, you could spend a little bit more time. Perhaps when we finish doing all these boys, we'll look at how would you elevate it for characters. That could be fun. Now, last thing I like to do with nearly all my models is add a little bit of oil here and there. So here I'm using a burnt sienna colour and kind of a raw umber colour, sepia colour here. These are by Absalom 502. You can get oils from all sorts of places. I like the AK ones, the Absalom ones. I think they're very affordable. They've got a good range of colours, and they're easy to pick up in many different hobby shops. You thin them down with mineral spirits to create a wash. And here you can see me just sort of dotting it on in little places here and there. I will link a video up all about working with oils, which the whole video just about that, I think, is better than me just repeating it here. Look how cool that pistol looks. I love that effect. I think it was amazing. I'm really going to pursue that. And here I'm just using a little bit of the neat oil to pull a few streaks down again over that bad moon symbol, again, just to help tie it into the thing. And, it seems a shame not to, right? For the base, if you want to know how I've done the base at the end, you can check out the Salamanders Captain video I did for the launch of Armageddon. It's exactly the same process as I use in that I use for these guys. And here I'm going in with a little bit of the sepia as well, just to add just a bit of variation, a bit of dirt and grime on the model. But as I say, the style of painting we've done, I think, on him already, I think, makes him look quite dirty and grimy. And speaking of dirty and grimy, here he is, done, with his chum as well. Or I don't know, frenemy? No. The death sculpt. I'm really excited as we finish the different clans in this. We'll add them in at the end of the video. And if I can find the knobs, I packed them up somewhere when I did the workshop move and I can't find them, but I will endeavour to by the end of the series. I think it will be nice to look at them together, see what commonality has run between them, see what tweaks have been made, and perhaps talk about that a little bit if you think that would be interesting. Because as much as these videos are about me trying to give you some recipes or give you some ideas to go off and create your own schemes for your own orc projects, it's also me kind of documenting this period I'm going through at the moment where I'm just trying out different things. They won't all work. Many of them won't work. Perhaps videoing them and showing them to thousands of people is a terrible idea. But I don't really mind. It's the way we learn, isn't it? And I think there's definitely things starting to occur that I'm like, I really like that. I really like how that looks, either as is or that's given me a little spark to go on and try and develop that a bit further. So if you'd like to talk about that at all in a future video, let me know in the comments, or perhaps it's something we'll talk about over on Twitch on the Monday show, or even one of the podcasts. So which clan do you like better, the Death Skulls or the Bad Moons? Or which one are you looking forward to me doing next? I'm going to do all of them, obviously. But I know which one I'm keen to do, and I think I'm going to end up doing at least 2 schemes for one of them because I just can't decide between the both. But as ever, if you've got any questions about anything I've done in the video, please pop them down in the comments and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you ever so much for all of your support. Take care, and I'll see you next time. If you like any of the models that you've seen in this video, but you don't have the time or the wherewithal to do them yourselves, then consider giving Ben an email at commissions@cultofpaint.com. Maybe he can help you out.